Good morning, second graders. Our objective today for math is we can and we will partition shapes into halves, thirds, and fourths. So this is very similar to what we were working on yesterday, but yesterday we looked a lot into halves. Today we're going to be focusing more on thirds and fourths. All right, when something is divided into thirds, how many equal shares does it have? Thirds means 3. I remember that if you're in third place, you're the third, you're not first or second, but you're third. So I always think of that number 3. So correct. We're going to draw 2 rectangles. So draw 2 rectangles that look like this. And then I want you to draw 2 lines in each rectangle to show 2 different ways to partition them into thirds. So one time you can draw the lines vertically. So if I'm going to do this, I could go 1, 2. Now those aren't the very best because this part is way bigger than this part. So sometimes when you're working on this, it might take you a minute to get it figured out, and that's okay. So I might move over now and go here and then here. Those look a little bit better. So that would be one way to partition a rectangle into thirds. Another way to partition your rectangle into thirds would be to go this way. 1, 2. So whenever you're partitioning rectangles into 3 parts, you draw 2 lines. So then you'll have 1 part, 2 parts, 3 parts. So go ahead and try those 2 different ways to partition your rectangle now. And then we're going to shade in 1/3 of each rectangle. What do you notice? It should look something like this. So we shaded in 1 part here and 1 part here. What do you notice? The thirds look different, right? Even though they are both thirds, one is long and skinny and the other is short and fat. Even though they're different shapes, they're still the same amount. They're both 1/3 of the whole shape. And in both parts, we have 2 parts that are left unshaded. So if we shade in 1, that means we have 2 parts left unshaded. All right, so let's point and count. This is 1/3. If we colored in another, we'd have 2/3. 2 out of 3 parts are colored in. And if we colored in a third, we would have 3/3. Okay, we're going to do this again. Draw 2 more rectangles. This time, I want you to draw 2 vertical lines to partition 1 rectangle into thirds. Then draw 1 vertical line to cut the other rectangle into halves. So we're going to do what we did before. We're going to cut 1 into thirds with 2 lines, and then 1 you're just going to split right in the middle to cut it into halves. Take your time to do that now. Pause if you need to, and press play when you're ready to move on. Yours should look something like this. If you haven't done this yet, please stop and do it now. All right, then we're going to color 1/3 of the top rectangle and 1/2 of the second rectangle. So 1 part in each. Should look something like this. Which shaded part is larger? 1/3 or 1/2? 1/2 is larger, right? So look at both rectangles. As a whole, which one has more parts, the halves or the thirds? Which one has more parts? The thirds. So we can say that thirds have more parts, but the parts are smaller than the halves. So think about that for a second. More parts, but these parts are smaller than if we just split it into halves. So the more times you cut a rectangle into smaller pieces, the pieces will get smaller. If we're cutting a shape into a bunch of pieces, the more pieces we cut it into, the smaller the pieces are going to be. If we just cut it into 1 piece, the piece is going to be pretty big. So let's try that with circles. And you can even be thinking about like a pizza. If I cut a pizza in half, only 1 time, you would get a lot of pizza. If I cut it in thirds, you get a little less. If I cut it in fourths, you get even a little less, and so on. So which is more, 1/3 or 1/2? It's the same as with the rectangle, right? So 1/2 is more than 1/3. 1/2 is greater because there's only 2 parts, and 1/3 is smaller because we cut the rectangle into 3 pieces. When something is divided into fourths now, how many equal pieces does it have? Equal parts. 4. So thirds is 3, fourths is 4. All right, we're going to draw a circle and then draw a line right down the middle of it vertically, so up and down. Once you've done that, press play. Then we're going to draw another line horizontally across the middle to cut it into fourths. Color and label 1/4. So you're just going to color in one of those parts and write 1/4 on it. Just like that. Let's point and count the fourths. We don't have a partner at home, but we can still point and count the fourths. All right. 1/4, 2/4, and if we kept going, we would have 3/4 and 4/4. When we have all of our parts shaded in, it's a whole. All right, let's try cutting a rectangle into fourths now. So draw another rectangle. There's a couple ways you can partition a rectangle into fourths. So the first way, and I think this is the easiest way, is first cut it in half and then split your halves in half. So you're gonna draw 3 lines in total. Second line, third line. So that's one way. Then you have 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces. I like cutting things into fourths because you just do your half and then cut your halves in half. So I'll show you another way. Same as with the other one. We can cut it in half this way. And then I'm going to cut these pieces also in half. So right in the middle of each one, right there. 3 lines. Now we have fourths. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's another way to cut your rectangle into fourths. The last way to cut your rectangle into fourths was go right in the middle, cut it in half this way, and then right in the middle, cut it in half this way. Now we have 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces. So there's a few different ways you can do this. I want you to split yours in fourths, whichever way you think is the easiest, and then you're going to shade in 1/4. When you're ready, pause now to do that, and when you're ready, press play. Your shape should look like one of these. So here's 1/4, 1/4, 1/4. These all look a little different, but they're all the same amount. They're 1/4 of the total rectangle. Okay, keep practicing if you want to. Draw a couple more rectangles and then shade in 3/4, 4/4. Sometimes we also see this word quarter. Quarter is the same as a fourth. So if I say quarters, think of there's 4 quarters in a dollar, there's 4 parts. So quarters, if you ever see that, it just means the same thing as fourths. So when we split something into 4 parts, we can call it quarters. Like think of sometimes in a football game, you split it into quarters. Sometimes in a basketball game, you split it into quarters. So whenever something is split into quarters, it's 4 parts. If it's halves, it's 2 parts. So we use those words quarters and fourths and halves and thirds quite a bit. So it's easy to think about food too when we talk about equal shares because there are so many foods we cut up to share with friends and family, like cakes, pizzas, quesadillas, candy bars. So we're going to play a little game where I'm going to talk about pizzas and a sheet cake. So think of a big rectangle cake and think of a pizza. So we're going to be talking about a rectangle and a circle. So then we're going to split those pizzas and cakes into halves, thirds, fourths, and show different ways to partition them or cut them. So for example, I'm going to say you get 3/4 of pizza. So you would draw a circle, split it into fourths, and shade in 3. It should look something like this, saying you get 3/4 of a pizza, I get 3 out of the 4 pieces of the pizza. So let's try this next one. You get 2/4 of a cake. Pause now, draw your rectangle cake, split it into fourths, and you're going to shade in 2/4. Press pause and play when you are ready to see if yours matches what I have. It looked like this. If you drew fourths another way and shaded in 2 parts, that would also be correct. All right, next one. You get 2/4 of a pizza. Pause to show 2/4 of a pizza. Press play when you're ready. You should have something that looks like this. I split it into fourths, and then I shaded in 2. All right, you get 1/4 of the cake this time. So draw a new rectangle, split it into fourths, and show me 1/4. That's right. It should look something like this. Last one, you get 1/2 of the cake. So draw a rectangle, split it in half, and shade in 1/2. It would look like this. Nice work. So now I'm going to check out some of the work that's similar to what we're going to be doing today so you really understand it. I'm going to put my computer down and you can see it just 1 second. Okay, so this is similar to what you'll be doing today, not exactly the same stuff, so I wanted to give you an example. The first one says, do the shapes below show halves or thirds? And when I look at them, they each have two parts. So those are halves. So I'm just going to circle halves. Draw one more line to partition each shape into fourths. So I was just telling you I love doing fourths. So there's already two parts. All I need to do is split those parts in half. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. This one's going to go a half this way. 1, 2, 3, 4. And this one's here. I'm just going to cut it across like I did the other one. 1, 2, 3, 4. So now I've equally split all of those pieces into halves. Next one says partition each rectangle into thirds, then shade in the shapes as indicated. So I want to split these all into thirds. Remember, when I'm doing thirds, I draw two lines. So I'm going to split this one into thirds. I'm drawing a line here and a line here. I can do them the exact same way for each one, or if you decided you want to do it a different way, you can do it this way as well. Alright, so then I'm going to get a different color to shade it in. So now each of my shapes is split into thirds. Yesterday I noticed some people adding on and drawing more shapes. When we're splitting our shapes up, we're not drawing anything outside of the rectangles, you're drawing the lines inside, just like this. So 2/3 is shading in 2 of the 3 parts. 2 out of 3. 1/3 and 3/3. So that's 3/3 means I'm coloring in all 3. I'm coloring in the whole. So that's an example of what that would look like. This next one is fourths. So same thing. I'm going to split each shape into fourths and shade in the correct amount. So a circle is really easy to split into fourths. Draw a line across this way and then this way. And this one says 1/4. So I'm going to shade in 1/4. The other ones are very similar. Just say 3/4, 4/4. 2/4. So you're just going to split them into 4 parts and shade in the correct amounts. All your work is similar to what I just showed you. So good luck. You're going to do great, and reach out if you have any questions at all.